You wake up at 3 a.m. and hear the front door slam shut. Your heart sinks because you already know your son, your daughter, your spouse has returned home intoxicated once again. You lie there in the darkness, feeling that familiar mixture of anger, despair, and helplessness washing over you like a cold tide. How many nights have you spent like this, praying to a God who seems distant, begging for a miracle that never comes? The silence of the house becomes deafening, broken only by the sound of stumbling footsteps and perhaps a glass breaking in the kitchen. You want to get up, to confront them, to shake them awake from this nightmare that has consumed not just them, but your entire family. But you've tried that before, haven't you? You've tried anger, you've tried tears, you've tried ultimatums. Nothing has worked. The person you love remains trapped in what seems like an unbreakable prison. In moments like these, when human strength fails and earthly solutions crumble, Saint Teresa of Jesus whispers from across the centuries, "The soul that surrenders to God finds in Him the strength it never knew it possessed." She understood something profound about spiritual warfare that most people miss. The battle against addiction isn't just fought in rehab centers or therapy sessions, it's fought in the unseen realm where grace meets desperation and love conquers what seems impossible. But here's what Saint Teresa knew that you need to understand right now. This battle is not yours to fight alone. You are not powerless. You are not without resources. The same God who transformed Saint Teresa from a worldly young woman into one of the Church's greatest mystics is the same God who can break the chains that bind your loved one. Are you ready to discover the 3 spiritual weapons that have been waiting in your hands all along? You've probably asked yourself 1,000 times, where did I go wrong? You replay conversations, moments, decisions, wondering if you could have prevented this descent into addiction. Maybe you've even begun to blame yourself, carrying guilt like a heavy stone in your chest. You look at family photos from better times and wonder if you'll ever see that genuine smile again, if you'll ever have a normal conversation without the shadow of alcohol hanging between you. The Catholic Church teaches us in the Catechism number 2290 that the virtue of temperance disposes us to avoid every kind of excess, the abuse of food, alcohol, tobacco, and medicines. Those who endanger their health and life through intoxication or disordered love of food commit a grave fault. But knowing this truth doesn't make the pain any easier, does it? It doesn't stop the sleepless nights or heal the wounds in your family's heart. Saint Teresa understood this kind of spiritual anguish. In her writings, she reveals, the devil never sleeps. He is always seeking ways to enter us. And if he sees that we are friends of some small vice, he begins to enter through there. She recognized that addiction is not just a physical or emotional problem. It's a spiritual battlefield. Your loved one isn't just struggling with a substance. They're in the grip of something that seeks to destroy their very soul, their dignity as a child of God. But listen carefully to what Saint Teresa also taught. Prayer is the weapon with which everything can be conquered. This isn't just poetic language or wishful thinking. This is the testimony of a woman who faced her own spiritual demons, who battled through periods of dryness, darkness, and doubt, and who emerged victorious. She's offering you the same weapons she used, the same path she walked. The question is, are you desperate enough to try something that goes beyond human understanding? Here's where most people make their first mistake. They pray once, twice, maybe for a week, and when nothing changes, they conclude that God isn't listening. But Saint Teresa learned something different about prayer during her own spiritual journey. She discovered that authentic prayer isn't a magic wand. It's a siege weapon that gradually weakens the enemy's stronghold. Let nothing disturb you. Let nothing frighten you. All things pass away. God never changes. Patience obtains all things. You must understand that every Ave Maria you pray, every rosary you offer, every Mass you dedicate to your loved one is like a drop of water that eventually carves through the hardest stone. Jesus himself taught us, "Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you." Matt 7:7. But notice the present continuous tense. Keep asking, keep seeking, keep knocking. This is not a one-time request. It's a persistent campaign of love. Saint Teresa also discovered the immense power of offering sacrifices for souls. When you fast a meal and offer that hunger to God for your loved one's liberation, When you give up something you enjoy and transform that small suffering into prayer, you're participating in Christ's redemptive work. You're literally trading your comfort for their freedom. The church has always taught that these offerings have supernatural power because they unite your love with God's infinite mercy. But here's the crucial part. You're not praying to change God's mind. You're praying to align your heart with His will and to open channels of grace that can reach your loved one even when they're too intoxicated to pray for themselves. Your perseverance in prayer becomes a lifeline thrown into the darkness where they're drowning. Will you commit to this spiritual discipline, even when you don't feel like it, even when you don't see immediate results? Perhaps you've walked past a bottle of holy water or seen a religious medal and thought, those are just old traditions that don't really do anything. But Saint Teresa knew better. She understood that God works through material things because we are not just spirits, we are embodied souls who need tangible reminders of invisible realities. The Catholic Church teaches that sacramentals dispose people to receive the principal effects of the sacraments and sanctify various circumstances of life. When you bless your home with holy water, you're not performing superstition. You're inviting God's protection into the very air your loved one breathes. When you place a miraculous medal under their mattress or in their wallet, you're surrounding them with Mary's motherly intercession. The scapular of Mount Carmel, the medal of Saint Benedict, these aren't lucky charms. They're spiritual weapons that create an atmosphere of grace that demons cannot tolerate. Think of it this way. If your loved one was physically ill, you would fill their room with medicine, healthy food, and everything needed for healing. When they're spiritually ill, why wouldn't you fill their environment with spiritual medicine? Place a crucifix where they can see it, even if they ignore it. Let sacred images be the last thing they see before sleep, and the first thing they see when they wake. These silent witnesses speak to the soul even when the mind is clouded by alcohol. Saint Teresa herself spoke of the power of these sacred signs in daily life. She knew that the spiritual realm is just as real as the physical one, and that blessed objects carry the power of the Church's prayers and Christ's presence. Your loved one may mock these things, but something deeper in their soul recognizes the holiness. Are you willing to transform your home into a sanctuary, even if others don't understand? This is perhaps the hardest spiritual weapon to wield, because it requires you to love without conditions, to hope without evidence, and to remain faithful even when your loved one seems determined to destroy themselves. Saint Monica spent 17 years praying for her son Augustine, watching him chase after worldly pleasures and false philosophies while her heart broke a little more each day. But she never gave up, and eventually, Augustine didn't just return to God. He became one of the Church's greatest saints. You need to understand that your role is not to be your loved one's savior. That's Christ's job. Your role is to be a persistent witness to hope, a living reminder that they are loved beyond their failures, that they are valuable beyond their addiction. This doesn't mean enabling their behavior or pretending that everything is fine. It means loving them enough to set boundaries while keeping your heart open to their eventual return. Saint Teresa reminds us, let nothing trouble you, let nothing frighten you. All things pass away. God never changes. Patience obtains all things. Whoever has God lacks nothing. This isn't passive waiting. It's active hope. It's choosing to see your loved one as God sees them, not as a failure, not as a lost cause, but as a beloved child who has temporarily lost their way home. Your unwavering love becomes a beacon that can guide them back when they're ready. The path can be long, discouraging, filled with relapses and false starts. There will be nights when you want to give up, when you're tempted to harden your heart to protect yourself from more pain. But remember, every saint was once a sinner, every miracle seemed impossible until it happened, and every prodigal son has a father waiting with open arms. Are you prepared to be an instrument of that divine patience, even when it costs you everything? Saint Teresa received a profound vision that she described in her masterpiece, The Interior Castle. She saw the soul as a magnificent crystal castle with many rooms, and she understood that addiction is like being trapped in the outermost courtyard, surrounded by spiritual creatures that keep the person from entering deeper into their own soul where God dwells. Your loved one isn't just choosing alcohol, they're spiritually imprisoned, unable to access the deeper rooms of their interior castle. This understanding changes everything about how you approach their addiction. They're not morally weak or lacking willpower. They're in spiritual bondage. Saint Teresa wrote, I saw the soul like a castle made of a single diamond or very clear crystal, in which there are many rooms, just as in heaven there are many dwelling places. But when a soul is in mortal sin, she saw this castle as covered in darkness, unable to see its own beauty or find its way to the interior rooms where God waits. When you understand this, your prayers become more focused. You're not just asking God to take away their desire for alcohol. You're asking Him to break down the spiritual barriers that keep them trapped in the outer courtyards of their own soul. You're praying for their eyes to be opened, for their spiritual hearing to be restored, for their heart to remember who they truly are as children of God. This is why Saint Teresa insisted that the door to enter this castle is prayer and consideration. Your loved one may be too spiritually paralyzed to pray for themselves, but your prayers can reach into those interior rooms and prepare the way for their eventual homecoming. You become their spiritual guide, helping them navigate back to the center of their soul, where Christ waits with healing and freedom. Can you see your loved one not as they are, but as they're meant to be? There will come a moment, Saint Teresa called it the dark night of the soul, when your loved one hits what people commonly call rock bottom. This is actually a sacred moment, though it may look like complete destruction. It's when all their earthly supports have crumbled, when their pride is broken, when they're finally ready to admit their powerlessness. Saint Teresa understood that sometimes God allows us to fall completely so that we'll finally look up. This is the moment your prayers have been preparing for. All those rosaries, all those masses, all those silent tears offered to God. They've been creating a reservoir of grace that will flood in when your loved one's heart finally cracks open. Saint Teresa wrote, "It is here that humility enters, for humility is truth. And the truth is that your loved one cannot save themselves through willpower or good intentions. They need supernatural intervention. But here's what you need to be prepared for. This moment of hitting bottom may look like your worst nightmare come true. They may lose their job, their relationship, their health, their self-respect. You'll be tempted to rush in and fix everything to cushion their fall, but sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step back and let God's grace do its work through their brokenness. Saint Teresa learned that God often writes straight with crooked lines, that He brings good out of what looks like total disaster. Your loved one's lowest moment may actually be their salvation moment. When they finally cry out, "God help me," from the depth of their despair, all heaven responds. Are you prepared to trust God's timing, even when it means watching someone you love suffer the consequences of their choices? Saint Teresa witnessed many miraculous transformations during her life as a reformer and spiritual mother. She saw proud, noble women become humble mystics, worldly priests become saints, and broken souls discover their infinite worth in God's eyes. She understood that no addiction is stronger than God's grace. No chain is too heavy for Christ to break. No heart is too hard for the Holy Spirit to soften. The moment of transformation often happens quietly, without fanfare. Your loved one may wake up one morning and simply decide they're done, or they may have a profound spiritual experience during Mass, or hear God's voice in their deepest moment of despair. Saint Teresa taught that God comes to us in the most ordinary moments, often when we least expect it. The grace you've been praying for may arrive wrapped in the most humble circumstances, but understand this: their transformation isn't the end of the journey, it's the beginning of a new one. Recovery from addiction is like entering Saint Teresa's interior castle. It's a progressive movement from the outer rooms of spiritual infancy toward the inner chambers where God dwells. There will be setbacks, moments of darkness, times when they struggle with temptation, but now they have weapons, prayer, the sacraments, the support of the church community. Your role shifts from desperate intercessor to grateful companion. You get to witness one of God's greatest miracles, the resurrection of a soul that was dead in addiction. Like the father of the prodigal son, you get to throw a celebration for someone who was lost and is now found, who was dead and is now alive. The same Christ who turned water into wine at Cana can transform the wine of addiction into the water of pure life. Are you ready to celebrate this miracle, even if it takes years to fully unfold? Saint Teresa learned through hard experience that the spiritual life is not a one-time conversion, but a daily choice to remain in God's grace. She wrote, "The soul that is vigilant and walks in the fear of the Lord will never be conquered by the enemy." This wisdom applies powerfully to those recovering from addiction. Your loved one's sobriety is not a destination but a journey that requires daily spiritual vigilance. This is where your continued prayers become crucial. The same devils that once used alcohol to torment your loved one are still prowling around, looking for new ways to attack. They might tempt them with other substances, with pride over their recovery, with complacency about spiritual practices, or with resentment toward God or family. Your ongoing intercession creates a protective barrier of grace around them, helping them navigate these subtle temptations. Saint Teresa taught that the higher a soul climbs spiritually, the more refined the attacks become. Your loved one may face spiritual dryness, doubt about their recovery, or the temptation to think they can handle just one drink. But now they have something they didn't have before: the experience of God's mercy, the memory of their deliverance, and the support of a family that never gave up on them. Celebrate every small victory, every meeting attended, every healthy choice made, every moment they choose prayer over self-pity. These aren't insignificant. They're evidence of God's continued work in their soul. Saint Teresa reminds us that patience obtains all things, and the patience required for ongoing recovery is just as important as the patience you showed during their active addiction. How will you continue to be an instrument of God's grace in their life? The most beautiful part of this spiritual journey is how one person's liberation from addiction becomes a source of hope and healing for the entire family. Saint Teresa understood that grace is never meant to stop with one person. It's meant to overflow and bless everyone it touches. Your loved one's recovery becomes a testimony to God's power that strengthens the faith of everyone who witnesses it. Think about how this struggle has deepened your own prayer life, how it has taught you to depend on God in ways you never had to before, how it has given you compassion for other families walking this painful path. Your suffering hasn't been wasted. It's been transformed into spiritual gold. You've learned prayers you never knew, discovered saints you never met, and experienced God's faithfulness in ways that comfortable families never do. Your recovered loved one often becomes a powerful instrument of grace for others struggling with addiction. They understand the despair, the shame, the seemingly impossible nature of the battle in ways that textbooks and theories never can. Many people in recovery become sponsors, counselors, or simply compassionate friends to others who are where they once were. The same Jesus who turned their personal hell into a testimony of hope can use their story to free others. Saint Teresa's final words remind us, it is time to meet one another. Your family's journey through addiction and recovery becomes a bridge to meet God in new ways, to meet each other with deeper love, and to meet other families with practical hope. The three spiritual weapons: persistent prayer with sacrifice, sacramentals and divine protection, and patient accompaniment with unwavering hope, don't just free one person from addiction. They transform entire families into warriors of light who can help